Dr. Farmer.
Hello, Lilou.
How are you doing today?
Doing well, doing well. Just had a great breakfast, and
Ready to go for the
the
day.
weather is overcast here in Southern California, or at least in the beach area, Laguna Beach, California. So we kind of missed the summer, but
You
here we
see,
go into fall.
I thought today you would be wearing your hat because I saw some amazing, beautiful pictures of you wearing all those great hats and being in nature.
Oh, that's kind of you. Yeah, I've got nature outside my door. My hats, unfortunately, they're tucked away somewhere. I didn't think to wear my hat today. I
So,
do off and on. I showed up one time at a workshop and I wasn't wearing my hat, and two or three people said, "What happened to your hat?" I've become probably a little too identified with the hat, so we'll see.
well, you're an author, a teacher, and a soul healer. So today we're going to talk about the soul healing, and tell us about that and why do we need to heal our soul?
It's a good question. The soul healer really encompasses a lot of different modalities. I spent 30 plus years as a psychotherapist, hypnotherapist. I've done a number of different kinds of trainings, trauma specialist, etc. Recovery from trauma. Evolved from about 15 years ago to doing shamanic practice, doing quite a bit of training and studying, etc., about shamanism. And so the soul healing to me, and there's probably different versions of it, I suspect, depending on who you talk to, but soul healing really is a term that encompasses all of that. I think there's some spiritual psychotherapeutic techniques that blend very, very nicely with the shamanism. Shamanism being, oh gosh, one of the oldest healing forms that's been around on the planet for thousands and thousands of years. The shaman was the original go-to person, whether these days we have psychiatrists and medical doctors and medical specialists, but the shaman was an herbologist, and the shaman really was the one who you would go to her or to him to seek some kind of healing, and they would first do spiritual healing, heal at the level of spirit. And then anything else that might be needed would be subscribed, such as certain kind of herbs or plant medicine, etc. So soul healing really is that I think in our societies, particularly Western societies, there's been a lot of what you would call soul loss. And that is that there's, if you picture the soul as sort of an etheric entity that animates us, that is our spirit really, that comes through as the soul, there's a likely chance that over the years that you've been on the planet that there's been some fragmentation or soul loss, and often it is due to trauma. It's as if not as if, but really a piece of our soul that fragments off and goes to a place where he or she or it stays safe until it can be recovered. Sometimes immediately, for instance, in a traumatic experience. I had a traffic accident about a year and a half ago, and I felt, knowing what I know, I could feel this kind of dissociation.
Oh.
And that's a psychological term, but it's also, when we think of it as soul fragmentation, that soul dissociates, unassociates, leaves, moves
Yeah.
away. It's as if a piece of me kind of left and said, "Whoa, wait a minute, what just happened?" It
Hmm.
was a fairly minor traffic accident, and I actually felt that piece come back in when things settled down.
So it's
But
like
some,
it's a mini. It's the soul leaves the body. It's out of the body then, and you're saying stays somewhere
well, let's put
until
it this
it's
way: it's
safe
not
enough to
it's
come back
not the
in.
soul itself, because if the soul left your
A,
body, that'd be it. You're dead.
a piece of the soul.
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish that it really is like an aspect or a piece or a fragment of the soul that leaves and sort of takes on its own existence, if you will, into a place called non-ordinary reality. And the task really is to either somehow call that soul piece back, and there's actually a number of ways. There's a shamanic method that's very, very effective, but
Cool.
there's a number of ways. If we go into deep grief, for instance, and we say, "I miss that part of me," we start to call that part back. In shamanism, there's a particular type of healing called soul recovery or soul retrieval. And that's where the shaman or the shamanic practitioner sends his consciousness or his soul into non-ordinary reality with the help of his spirit helpers to seek that soul piece and then bring it back and sort of install it in the person. It's very, very, very effective, and it's completely compatible with psychologically what I've understood about trauma and the nature of post-traumatic, what's been called post-traumatic stress disorder.
So how can we know how much we're complete? I mean, how can we know how much of our the pieces of our soul are out there versus really with us and
That's a really good
connected?
question, Lilou. There are certain symptoms that would suggest, and I say suggest, some kind of soul loss. Depression, lethargy, walking into a room feeling like something's missing, you're looking for something that you're not sure quite what it is, a feeling of sort of alienation or a distancing from oneself. In other words, psychologically, we might call that feeling dissociation. We feel a little dissociative, like we're not really in our body. Those are some of the signs that suggest that there may be some soul loss. Now, it's not a hard and fast diagnosis because we're really dealing with spiritual, or the spiritual root of illnesses. And those are emotional, psychological, physical illnesses even. So those are some ways that you can tell. If you've had a really serious traumatic experience, then I would be suspect of soul loss. The key here, though, is that in terms of my work as a soul healer and shamanic practitioner, is that I'm going to consult with my guides, my spirit guides, because it really is spiritual healing. And I've learned over the years that we've developed this relationship, that I can trust them to take me to that soul piece that most needs to be returned. And there's never been an instance where I haven't found something or some piece of a person's soul to bring back and to install. I think one of the keys here, Lilou, too, is that we're talking in metaphors when we speak of spiritual experiences. And more, I think of that term metaphor not as some literary device, but really as a way to speak about some of these spiritual matters. Now, are they true? Is it provable? Not in the usual sense, because the term provable is more left brain, scientific, we got to do experiments to do this, versus having the experience of a soul retrieval and just feeling more whole and feeling better. There's a whole different reality when we speak of the soul's reality than the usual meaning of reality.
Mm-hmm. 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 So and you are using also the animal, not the animal kingdom, but the spirit of animals to help you to connect with that greater
Yeah,
self. I mean, to help. I mean, how what is
right.
your relationship to the animal spirit?
Sure, let's put the soul retrieval aside just for a moment and talk about spirit animals or animal spirit guides. Book by the same name, Animal Spirit Guides. I've got one called Power Animals. These are animal spirit guides are any animal that shows up. Any animal that shows up in the physical form or even in the symbolic form. Symbolic meaning we might dream of an animal, or we see a billboard or a poster of an animal. We hear a sound that sounds like an animal. Those are symbols. Looking in a book, for instance. So any animal that shows up, whether the physical animal or the symbol of the animal, in an unusual way or repeatedly, and I would say or repeatedly, there's a really interesting thing that's going on here. Again, at the soul level and in the soul's language. And what's going on is that spirit, great spirit, is trying to reach us through, you could say, the collective consciousness or the oversoul of a particular species. And that a member of that species shows up for us in either physical or symbolic form. For instance, I was working in my office about 3 years ago, finishing up a project, a writing project, one of my oracle cards. I think it was Messages from Your Animal Spirit Guides oracle cards. And I'm goofing off. I'm playing backgammon on the computer or something like that. I'm just goofing off when I should be working. It was set aside for working. flying into my office. I just heard this flutter, and off to the left, I could sort of see it out of the corner of my eye, and bingo, something hits the sliding glass door that's right in front of my office that I'm facing and looking out at the garden. It's a different office than where I'm at right now. And I went, oh my goodness, I looked down there, and there's an adolescent hawk that flew into my office. Now, I've written about this on my website, drstephenfarmer.com. There's a number of articles, and this one I think is called Jasper the Hawk or something like that. It's a whole involved story. But basically, I paused, I took a breath, and I thought, well, what's the meaning of this? I would qualify that as unusual, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. I don't know many times a hawk or bird flies into one's office or home, but that was definitely unusual. Yeah. Well, immediately what came to mind was focus on your work. Now, the idea is that I received a message from not just that hawk that was in the office, that probably had a splitting headache by then because it pretty well slammed against the sliding glass door, but I believe what was happening is just what I described, is that it's as if Hawk Grand Central said, okay, look, Farmer's not working. He's not working like he's supposed to. So let's send him a message through one of our couriers. And so then Hawk gets the assignment to fly in. Again, metaphor. You hear the metaphor? Yeah. It's a story. I don't know. There's no way to prove it's true, but it's a way to think about how these animal spirit guides work. And as a result, I got the message. And the other thing is that we learned is that it was chasing a dove. It was looking for lunch, in other words. And there was this little dove I found a few minutes later, tucked away, just shaking, because the hawk had been chasing it. So then I got a second message, his dove is calm down, relax. And second is the hawk was chasing a goal, pursuing a goal. So I was reminded I'm pursuing a goal here. So keep on the goal, stay focused, and stay calm about it. So all those three things came through in that one experience. That's a good example of animal spirit guides. And they want to help us. It really wants to help us out.
But the spirit of the animals, do they also have a mission or a reason for being here to help our soul evolve too and heal?
Yeah, I think that's well stated. I really believe that there's a force that we could call spirit that is wanting to work with us. The animals, I think the earth itself, all the beings of the earth are really crying out for our help. And it's not just to help them, but it's to re-establish a different kind of, establish a different kind of relationship with the earth, one that's more intimate and respectful. It's pretty obvious, and it's pretty sometimes painfully obvious, what's going on with our planet. But it's not the planet. Earth is going to do just fine. It's that we have to revise our relationship. And I believe that these spirit guides, in whatever form they come, it could be angels, it could be ascended masters, it could be very, very well, I know, as ancestors, especially in our Western culture, we don't pay attention to our ancestors and the wisdom that they carry after they've gone into spirit world and they're able to connect with a larger force and to see things in a different way, from their place in spirit world. So the ancestors and the animal spirit guides and the plant spirits are all reaching out to us in some way, shape, or form. As I said in my book, Earth Magic, it says the earth is speaking to us in all sorts of different ways. We just need to learn how to listen, and I would add to that, respond.
I love your quote that says, the world speaks to us, we just need to learn how to become better listeners.
Yeah, and listeners in all ways, through all the senses that we have, the visual, and we got a ways to go with that. We've got, hundreds, if not thousands of years of habits that, our ancestors, when they were in form, really have handed down to us as just a way of relating to the earth as something to be conquered and something for our use as human beings, and disregarding the fact that pretty well known at this point that we're all interconnected and we're on this little rock in the middle of this universe. We're not that big of a deal really when it comes down to it, but as human beings we tend to think we are. So part of my mission with this and the teachings and the books and the radio show and the website and everything is to encourage and facilitate as much as I possibly can a deeper kind of soul healing, which is to reconnect with spirit, to really establish that as a 24/7 experience, to be able to relate to the earth not just some abstract God in the sky or angels in the sky, but that we need to also be able to incorporate the idea that God, whatever name you want to give that force, Great Spirit, all that is, universal consciousness, I don't care what you call it, it depends on who I'm talking to. As long as we understand it's more than the concept, it's very much a reality, and that reality exists as soon as you walk outside. My church is not a building. My church is in the backyard.
Yeah.
It's down at the beach. It's in the forest. That's where the real church is, I believe.
And it's all around us at all time, but a lot of people now are craving this connection, I feel.
Yeah. And in my book, Earth Magic, which it looks like you were reading from that, Lilou, I tell the story of a tree healing, which, like I say, this is another version of soul healing where a plant actually helped heal my back. I won't even say helped heal, it really healed it. The short version of that is I was in a 2-week process, shamanic training years ago, and one of these times I went out, I'd spent about 5 days in a row sitting next to a tree, communing with the tree and listening and taking in all sorts of information and teachings from tree spirit. And my back, one day I was so sore I could barely walk. It was just really tight. So I went out tree spirit and I did my usual prayers and offered tobacco to the tree as an exchange. And I thought, what the heck, I'm going to ask tree to heal me. So I sat there, put my back against the tree, and I said, tree spirit, please heal my back, please. And I thought, what the heck, give it a try here. I'm in a shamanic training anyway. Yeah. And I think I meditated like that for about maybe 5 minutes at the most, not very long, maybe 10 at the outside. And I got up and my back was still like tight. And I went, oh, well, it was worth a shot. About an hour later, about an hour and a half later, I went back to the class, sat down for, the lecture that lasted about an hour, took a break, got up and stood up, and I went, oh my God, my back is not sore anymore. Completely healed. I don't mean just better, but completely healed.
So are they? So you're saying that the tree has a soul and has a higher frequency or has a higher energy or is into? I mean, how is that? How was that possible?
That's, again, you're a good interviewer. You asked some really good questions. The tree, we could say the tree has a spirit, and a spirit meaning like a life force. Think about it. It's a miracle. I grew some tomato plants, over the summer. It's a miracle. Yeah. I left for a week and a half, came back, and I went, oh my God, there's tomatoes all over. I mean, we kind of go, oh, okay, big deal. It's tomatoes. It's a tomato. So but if you stop and just consider it, it really is miraculous for something like this to happen. What I'm saying by that is there's a life force that wants to move out into life, into the earth. And it could be through the form of a tree or a tomato plant. But we want to emerge into this physical reality in some way. So there's some sort of a force that we can call spirit, or a life force that we can call spirit, that isn't, it's like I am life expressing itself as me, not through me, not from me, but as me. You are life expressing itself as you. That tree is life expressing itself as that tree. The tomato plants are life, you get the point. Yeah. So, and back to your question, yes, that tree that I sat next to and that healed me, I appealed not just to the tree, the physical tree, which is pretty magnificent anyway, but in addition to that physical tree, the aspect of that physicality that is vibrating at that, you could say, that denser level, or that slower level of vibration, there's also a higher vibration that is an aspect of the tree that we could call its life force or spirit. So I'm reaching to that with my consciousness and making an appeal for a particular kind of a healing, and the response was there. Now, I'm not saying that would be always the case, but in this case, it was one of those little miracles.
So where do we need to, yeah, totally. Totally miracle. But how can we open up to that unseen energy? For example, to the tree. Did you have to raise your frequency or open your heart, or how? What's the different? I mean, steps if there is
Sure,
such a thing.
sure. What the difference, Lilou, is that I don't, different steps is so much, but that what is going on then is that as we move into a quieter state, a state of, you could say, a trance state, which by the way isn't a big deal. We go in and out of trance all the time, but the brain waves slow down. It's been shown and proven, and more is being considered about something called a theta rhythm, which is a certain way that the brain has slowed down. We usually operate anywhere from 14 cycles per second on up. You and I right now are in what you could call beta. It's an active, alert, attentive state. And
Mm-hmm.
then when we get a little bit sleepy or quiet, or we go into a mild trance, we would call that alpha. And that's usually the brainwaves slow down to about 7 to 14 cycles per second. And then as we move into a more relaxed state, they slow down to about 4 to 7 cycles per second. So it's a very slow. And what we believe, like Buddhist monks who meditate for years, they can go to theta like that. What we believe is that when we operate at that pace, or our brain operates at that pace, it really is a conduit to the spirit world. So what I'm saying is, going back to the example of the tree, when I sat there breathing, overlooking the magnificent Pacific Ocean from a cliff that was 1,000 feet in the air, just
Mm-hmm.
a beautiful, beautiful scenery, nature, the natural world, which is one way to access this state. We don't have to go down to 4 to 7 cycles per second. We just get outside. Again, my church is outside. But when we start to slow down and pay attention and listen in a different way, not listen with our agenda or our busy mind, but listen underneath that and pay attention to what's going on, then we're much more available to Spirit's promptings, teachings, and healings, however they may be. They could be through an animal spirit guide, could be through the kind of the more abstract idea of an angel. Um, Angels are beings that have never been on this planet, so they can help us from beyond the planet, but they've never really lived in a human body. Whereas animal spirit guides have a physicality, ancestors have had a physicality. I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit.
No,
I'm going
no,
way beyond the question,
it's absolutely fascinating. It's
but
great.
that's
You're
the
explaining it
basic
well.
point. The basic point is that when we just slow down and pay attention and listen, not just with our ears, but our eyes and our senses particularly, it
Mm-hmm.
makes it more likely that we'll be able to access spirit in all sorts of different forms and lead it more and more of a spirit-directed life, one that is um, appreciative and connected in an intimate way to all beings on the planet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how does it communicate to us? Because it's a different kind of communication.
Sure,
We might ask a question and then what? Like, for
that's a good
example, we're
question.
in a forest.
An example would be first off, identifying. What's helpful is identifying for each individual to identify what are your primary sources of information in the world. So, for instance, some people are more visual, some more auditory, myself, some more kinesthetic, meaning physical sensations in the body, emotions, but particularly sensations. And the fourth is cognitive, thought, inspiration. So if you pay attention to how you take in just the usual information, like who is it? I was talking to a friend yesterday. We sat and had a conversation, talked about an hour, and he was describing how he's more visual. How his girlfriend, who has some daughters, is he'll take them shopping and he'll be able to spot certain things that he's able to pull off the rack and say, here, try this, because he's more visual. So that's how he's going to access spiritual information more likely than these other modalities. Usually people are really good at, primary, good at one primary modality and
Mm-hmm.
pretty good at a second, and then need to develop the third and the fourth. Myself, for instance, Lilou, is that I'm more auditory, so I hear. It's like a whisper in the ear. Auditory and kinesthetic, or I get a sensation. When I'm doing readings, which I do, intuitive readings, spirit animal readings, a lot of times I'll get sensations in my body that will then be interpreted by my mind. Some people are more cognitive, scientists. You know, they'll get their scientist types and analytics will get their information more through thought and inspiration. So that's how the first thing is to identify. You said steps. Identify, you know, what way do you do this? Second thing is, as I said in a broader sense of the word, listen, listen. Go out and listen to the trees. Get to know the trees. You know, pay attention, especially, and this is where what's really cool about animal spirit guides. Pay attention to the animals that come your way, especially those that show up in an unusual way and or repeatedly, excuse me, or through repetition. And then what you do is there are resources like my book, Animal Spirit Guides, which gives some suggestions about possible meanings. However, and that's a nice bridge, you know, to ultimately being able to go, okay, this hawk flies into my office. I close my eyes, go, hawk, what message do you have for me?
Yeah.
And then I pay attention. And for me, it's, again, primarily listening. I might get a feeling. I might, in my mind's eye, see an image. Or my vision might be drawn to something in the environment. As soon as I ask the question, what's the message? And this is really key, Lilou, as soon as I ask the question, then I pay attention to everything that happens.
Right, but being present to that as being a message is key. Like,
yeah, oh yeah,
you have to see it, because I guess a lot of people have those flash or hear things but just dismiss it, don't we?
Oh, it's so true, because we don't have a lot of support for that. We've tended to be acculturated into believing that God is out there somewhere, that this is not an aspect, or I'm not an aspect or an expression of God. And that word is so loaded for so many people. I don't, somebody believes what they believe. I'm not interested in trying to convert people, but I do want to ask certain questions. It's like, well, maybe God, or you could say Great Spirit, or life force itself, or all that is, whatever term you want to give to that. That is, of course, we're a living expression of that force, of that power. And people, I think we've just been trained, you know, for so long in denying and separating. And that's the ultimate spiritual wound, is this illusion that we're somehow separate from Spirit, that we're separate from God. No, we're a beautiful, divine expression of God, just like everything on this planet. Even this kind of scarier stuff, hurricanes, earthquakes, that's all an expression of God. I've once said, God is in the light and God is in the dark. You know, get to know the dark. Take the light and put it into the dark. It's okay, but don't be afraid of it. The darkness in ourselves, you know, those shadowy elements that kind of interfere and inhibit us from our wholeness and from our uniqueness, and from expressing our fullness into this planet, into this earth, and accomplishing what we need to accomplish while we're here.
Tell us about that little, is that an angel that is on your wall back there?
Yes, it is. I've got, I don't know if you can see, I've got two.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah.
Let me just, let me play with this a little bit. There's two paintings.
Yeah.
I can't draw this too far, but there's an angel, Mary, I think her name is Mary Lou, gifted this to me. It's a beautiful, beautiful rendering of an angel. I don't know that it's a specific angel. And then what you're looking at there is a painting by my friend Jeremy Donovan from Australia. And it's depicting the rainbow serpent, which is in the mythology, or the stories, the creation stories for many of the Aboriginal people in Australia, is the rainbow serpent. The rainbow serpent crawled across the land and created the valleys and the hills and the water, etc. You know, different versions of it through different tribes and communities in Australia, but essentially that's the rainbow serpent. And the one right behind me is another Jeremy Donovan of two intertwined snakes, rainbow serpents, and that's a representation of DNA, which is a whole nother topic.
Yeah, that would be another interesting one that you talk about too. And reprogramming of the DNA. I just love those conversations as well. But as you said, maybe for another time. However,
yeah, it gets pretty intricate and complex, but yeah, it's fascinating. Again, soul's reality. What's the DNA? I got a whole story about DNA, but again, I don't know how much time we have left. It would take a couple.
You talk also about, we can do that at the DNA maybe another time, because it's a vast
Sure.
topic. But I also read some things about the ancestral karma that we could heal, and it is important to heal. Can you tell us a little bit more about
Yeah,
that?
I've actually, Lilou, downloaded some information. It's come in different ways about what you could call ancestral karma. Karma is sort of this yin yang balancing act that goes on. Some people who look at it as a past life balancing act. Some people misinterpret karma as punishment, which it's not. But what we do have from our ancestors, it's a pretty simple idea, and that's that the wounding that we carry and the effects of that wounding that we carry. Excuse me, that was my fault. The effects of the wounding that we carry, we can trace back through our ancestral lineage. And there's a process that I don't want to take all the credit for this, but it's something that's evolved in my own teaching and my own healing work. Is it's possible through this process to reach back across time to an ancestral spirit when you've identified, let's say, a certain problem or self-defeating behavior or even a physical illness. I came across one story of a woman who suddenly at about 35 years old developed this intense fear of drowning. And she never had that before. And so she did some healing with an ancestor, went back about, I think it was two, it might have been three, but I think 2 or 3 generations back to a grandfather who died in the Titanic accident.
All right.
And so what she did is to work at a spiritual level to send healing, love, energy, power to this ancestor to release that fear of drowning, and then that healing came back to her, and she's fine now.
Mm-hmm.
That's an
Wow.
example. The cool thing about this, the thing that works about this too, is that if I do this with a particular self-defeating behavior or a problem or an illness or an addiction, and I can identify what that is in myself, and then I can, through this process, which I won't go into right now, but a process that of calling in the ancestor that's also carrying that particular wounding, that I can then heal that with the help of spirit and receive the benefits myself from that healing, and my offspring will then also benefit. And I've done some healing work myself, ancestral healing, that's what we're calling the karma, how this kind of follows from ancestor to ancestor. And typically we only have to work with maybe the subsequent 3 generations, parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. Because if 700 years ago somebody carried something that's been handed down here, you can bet that it's in one of those ancestors there. So that's what we work with this healing, this ancestral karma.
How do
And
you
as a
see those
result,
how do you see those timelines though between the past, the present, the future, the different time dimensions? Are you just jumping from? I mean, how does this look like to you?
again, great questions, Lilou. The way it looks like this is a way to think about it conceptually is that in this kind of work, in spirit work, for instance, I can do remote healing. I've done it. You know, I can send healing power or energy, or I can do a soul retrieval remotely, or I can do some extraction, which means cleaning up, you know, stuff that doesn't belong there etherically. I've done this quite a bit. I do phone consultations. I do remote healing a fair amount of the time, in addition to face-to-face private consultations. So that's one sense, is that space really is a left brain phenomena. We think of space in a very linear way, and that's understandable. It's useful. You know, if I want to walk to the door and through the door, I have to have a sense of that space and what it takes to walk through there. But if I want to, let's say, Mary Jane in Minnesota, you know, calls me up and we do a soul retrieval, what I do is I take myself there energetically to see what's going on. I do my work, and then I retrieve the soul and I return it to her. I just did one of these yesterday, a private consultation, and it works. So with ancestors, similar kind of idea. In the spirit world, time is a whole different thing. In the spirit world, I can take myself back it's even a misnomer to say I take myself back, because a different way to look at it is that exists right here and now. My ancestors are with me right now. My Grandpa Mac is with me right now. I can feel him. And he's a typical ancestor, my father's father. He's typically one of the ancestors I work with. And what I recall in terms of when he was alive was I was one of his favorites, and he loves me, and now across time and space he continues to love me. So same idea, if I want to do some ancestral healing, ancestral karma with Grandpa Mac or any of my ancestors, I would call on them here and now from the spirit world, and they're right here. I've also contacted an ancestor, as the best of my estimates, it's about 600 BC, a big Irish Celtic fellow that was the tribal shaman, and that's a whole other story. But that isn't necessary to go that far back to do ancestral healing. We're really looking at the
Because you have oracle cards as well. How do you define oracle cards? What are they for?
Yeah, the oracle cards. Let's see if I have. Oracles have existed throughout time for us human beings. Looking at patterns in the sky, the way the wind blows, even tea leaves, palm reading, psychics. We go to psychics to discover something or to find out a little bit more information about this or that or whatever. These kind of cards are, a lot of people say, oh, are they like tarot cards, which are, by the way, an oracle, or a divination tool is another term for it. These are a little bit different. There's actually, in this deck, it's called Messages from Your Animal Spirit Guides, Oracle Cards, and it comes with a guidebook like this. So that when you, let's say, if you want to do just a one-card reading here,
Yeah.
We'll pull a card and see what it says, if that's all right, Lilou.
Sure,
it's
yeah.
up to
I
you.
tried it on your site too. I saw that you can do it on your site.
Yeah, these cards you can get a free, gosh,
cool.
there's a free meditation, a free oracle card reading. I'm beginning that I think is really cool, because you just punch the card with your mouse. It turns over and it gives you a quick reading. These, similar idea here with these. And also I've got an iPhone app from the original, from the first deck.
Yeah.
And then this one's going to be an iPhone app. My first deck is called Power Animal Oracle Cards. And again, it's what the way these oracles work, is that they're at some pre-conscious level, we know certain things that we're either just below our conscious awareness, or we don't want to know, or we're about to understand, or we're about to bring forth this understanding, but it just isn't there. So we do something. We go to a psychic. We listen for signs. We get an animal spirit guide that comes in. The crow that sits out on the arbutus tree here, that showed up yesterday eating some of the fruit from the arbutus tree. And the message there was a reminder about the magic. It was a reminder about being able to manifest what my dreams are. And that's, again, a whole nother, it's related to some other work I've done. It's like, yeah, it's, keep going, you're doing okay. Plus a need for nourishment, to be able to nourish myself. That's another way.
Sorry, what is your big dream?
Well, my big dream, there's certain things that are coming to fruition now, which is a book that I don't want to talk too much about yet, because it's just an idea, and there's some work that's being done on it. That's one aspect of the dream, is to get this book out here, which I'm a healer and a teacher. I'm not a mystic. I go to mystical realms, I can do that, but it's kind of like mediumship. It's not my main gig. It's really about healing, and the fundamental healing, the basic healing that we all are looking for, I think, is to heal that spiritual wound, which is the illusion of being separate from spirit. So that's one. What's been the other has been happening, because it's coming to me more than I'm seeking it, is that we're also in the midst of preparing a children's spirit animal oracle card deck. That'll be out somewhere in March or April. And then follow that is a series of children's books that relate to the spirit animals. So it's also reaching children at an earlier age that hopefully the parents will, parents that are open to this will help their children understand that there's a spiritual reality that we've, with everything, with the trees and the plants and the animals. So there's that showing up. There's some travel coming up. I'm doing a lot of, again, people can go to drstephenfarmer.com. There's my schedule. They can sign up for the newsletter.
Website too. Congratulations. It's really nice.
Thank you very much. I attribute a lot of that to Jessica, my assistant. She's takes good care of the website. Okay. Here's the one that I drew. This is on your behalf.
See
it's
it
camel.
there's the video. A camel. Ooh,
Let me show it up a little bit. You see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Camel says, through the cards, trust that you have the resources to get you through the challenges that are before you.
Okay.
Now, what will happen is if this hits a note for you, great. It means that camel spirit can be helpful for you.
Okay.
So it's not just an oracle or a divination or a reading, but it's the possibility of calling on this spirit or any spirit guides to say, great. You know, you may, in other words, what this suggested here is that you may have concerns or doubts, and we don't need to go into details about this, but about some of the challenges before you might have concerns and doubts, but camel is coming through, the message is coming through spirit, through this.
I'm glad he's coming through the card, because otherwise in Chicago I don't see a camel very often walking around here.
I don't think you do. Neither do we do here in Laguna Beach, Lilou, that's for sure. But here's the reality. You don't need to ever actually see the physical animal. You can call on the spirit. There's a few in here that zebras, I don't know. I don't see many zebras walking around the streets of Laguna either. And then you can go, if you wish, you can go to the guidebook for a more extended reading, which I don't want to take the time to do here. But let me just give you a simple. Trust that you have the resources to get through the challenges before you. Sometimes it feels like you're journeying across a vast, lifeless desert that stretches beyond the horizon with no end in sight, etc., etc. It goes into the reading a little bit more, and it's also very hopeful. Like you can do this. You can get through this, and don't. Whoever draws this card, you or whoever draws this card, it's like it expands your possibilities. Like you go, oh wait, I guess I do have a number of resources. And then the other thing is resources start showing up. A friend calls and says, oh, Lilou, I wanted to tell you about this and so. And you go, thank you. Thank you, Spirit, for bringing this information to me. That's how the resources show up.
Awesome.
Excuse me.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us, Stephen.
I enjoyed it. You're a very good interviewer.
Thank you. You're great to interview. That helps.
No, you had very good questions, and you get me talking. Sometimes it's hard for me to shut up. So I appreciate you indulging me in kind of rambling here and there. But the focus again is to
the focus was
just
there on the
more
topic.
and more of us need to just be reminded who we really are and what our connection is to not only this planet, but the universe, but especially this planet. So thank you. I honor what you're doing too. Thank you very much. And anytime you want to do this again, I'm real happy to. Healing really is a term that encompasses all of that. I think there's some spiritual psychotherapeutic techniques that blend very, very nicely with the shamanism. Shamanism being, one of the oldest healing forms that's been around on the planet for thousands and thousands of years. The shaman was the original go-to person, whether these days we have psychiatrists and medical doctors and medical specialists, but the shaman was an herbologist, and the shaman really was the one who you would go to her or to him to seek some kind of healing, and they would first do spiritual healing, heal at the level of spirit, and then anything else that might be needed would be subscribed, such as certain kind of herbs or plant medicine, etc. So soul healing really is that I think in our societies, particularly Western societies, there's been a lot of what you would call soul loss. And that is that there's, if you picture the soul as sort of an etheric entity that animates us, that is our spirit, really, that comes through as the soul. Um, there's a likely chance that over the years that you've been on the planet, that there's been some fragmentation or soul loss, and often it is due to trauma. As if not as if, but really a piece of our soul that fragments off and goes to a place where he or she or it stays safe until it can be recovered. Sometimes immediately, for instance, in a traumatic experience. I had a traffic accident about a year and a half ago, and I felt, knowing what I know, I could feel this kind of dissociation.
Oh.
And that's a psychological term, but it's also, when we think of it as soul fragmentation, that soul dissociates, unassociates, leaves, moves
Yeah.
away. It's as if a piece of me kind of left and said, whoa, wait a minute, what just happened? It
Mm-hmm.
was a fairly minor traffic accident, and I actually felt that piece come back in when things settled down.
So it's
But
like
some,
it's a mini. It's the soul leaves the body. It's out of the body then, and you're saying stays somewhere
well, let's put
until
it this
it's
way:
safe enough to
it's
come back
not the
in.
soul itself, because if the soul left your
A,
body, that'd be it. You're dead.
a piece of the soul.
Yeah, I think it's important to distinguish that it really is like an aspect or a piece or a fragment of the soul that leaves and sort of takes on its own existence, if you will, into a place called non-ordinary reality. And the task really is to either somehow call that soul piece back, and there's actually a number of ways. There's a shamanic method that's very, very effective, but
Cool.
there's a number of ways. If we go into deep grief, for instance, and we say, I miss that part of me, we start to call that part back. In shamanism, there's a particular type of healing called soul recovery or soul retrieval. And
Hello, Dr. Farmer.
hello, Lilou.
How are you doing today?
Doing well, doing well. Just had a great breakfast, and
Ready to go for the
the
day.
weather is overcast here in Southern California, or at least in the beach area, Laguna Beach, California. So we kind of missed the summer, but
You
here we
see,
go into fall.
I thought today you would be wearing your hat because I saw some amazing, beautiful pictures of you wearing all those great hats and being in nature.
Oh, that's kind of you. Yeah, I've got nature outside my door. My hats, unfortunately, they're tucked away somewhere. I didn't think to wear my hat today. I
So,
do off and on. I showed up one time at a workshop and I wasn't wearing my hat, and two or three people said, "What happened to your hat?" I've become probably a little too identified with the hat, so we'll see.
well, you're an author, a teacher, and a soul healer. So today we're going to talk about the soul healing, and tell us about that and why do we need to heal our soul?
It's a good question. The soul healer really encompasses a lot of different modalities. I spent 30 plus years as a psychotherapist, hypnotherapist. I've done a number of different kinds of trainings, trauma specialist, etc. Recovery from trauma. Evolved from about 15 years ago to doing shamanic practice, doing quite a bit of training and studying, etc., about shamanism. And so the soul healing to me, and there's probably different versions of it, I suspect, depending on who you talk to, but soul healing, that's where the shaman or the shamanic practitioner sends his consciousness or his soul into non-ordinary reality with the help of his spirit helpers to seek that soul piece and then bring it back and sort of install it in the person. It's very, very, very effective, and it's completely compatible with psychologically what I've understood about trauma and the nature of post-traumatic, what's been called post-traumatic stress disorder.
So how can we know how much we're complete? I mean, how can we know how much of our the pieces of our soul are out there versus really with us and
That's a really good
connected?
question, Lilou. There are certain symptoms that would suggest, and I say suggest, some kind of soul loss, depression, lethargy, walking into a room feeling like something's missing. You're looking for something that you're not sure quite what it is, a feeling of sort of alienation or a distancing from oneself. In other words, psychologically, we might call that feeling dissociation. We feel a little dissociative, like we're not really in our body. Those are some of the signs that suggest that there may be some soul loss. Now, it's not a hard and fast diagnosis because we're really dealing with spiritual, or the spiritual root of illnesses. And those are emotional, psychological, physical illnesses even. So those are some ways that you can tell. If you've had a really serious traumatic experience, then I would be suspect of soul loss. The key here, though, is that in terms of my work as a soul healer and shamanic practitioner, is that I'm going to consult with my guides, my spirit guides, because it really is spiritual healing. And I've learned over the years that we've developed this relationship, that I can trust them to take me to that soul piece that most needs to be returned. And there's never been an instance where I haven't found something or some piece of a person's soul to bring back and to install. I think one of the keys here, Lilou, too, is that we're talking in metaphors when we speak of spiritual experiences. And more, I think of that term metaphor not as some literary device, but really as a way to speak about some of these spiritual matters. Now, are they true? Is it provable? Not in the usual sense, because the term provable is more left brain, scientific, we got to do experiments to do this, versus having the experience of a soul retrieval and just feeling more whole and feeling better. There's a whole different reality when we speak of the soul's reality than the usual meaning of reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, and you are using also the animal, not the animal kingdom, but the spirit of animals to help you to connect with that greater
Yeah,
self. I mean, to help. I mean, how what is
right.
your relationship to the